3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Lives Podcast. My name is Luke and I'm joined as always by Quest. And today we're talking to a modern day Alpha 3 star, Kyokuji, aka Lance. His YouTube bio says that he spends a lot of time playing dead games. And if you know who he is, you probably also spend too much time playing dead games. And I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you probably do spend a lot of time playing dead games. So you're likely to know who this guy is. So without further ado, it's our pleasure to welcome Kyokuji to the podcast. So over to you, Quest, to kick off the show.
Thanks, Luke. Welcome to the podcast, Lance. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. When did you start to play Alpha 3 competitively?
It depends what you mean competitively, I guess, but probably sometime in like the early to mid 2000s, like long time ago. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking on GGPO.
Actually, I started like way before that, like back when Kylera was the only way to play online, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
There was a ton of input delay, but like back then I was young, it was all we had, so it's kind of where I started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, nice. So you would have to actually how would matchmaking work? You're like
it was basically like you would set up a room and someone would come in and then you would start the game. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nice. Was there strong players back then? Like, do you
I mean, relative to like the situation, like there are people in there who are strong. Like, if you go back then, if you compared us then to like the actual offline players, it was like pretty bad. Like we were nowhere near them.
Yep.
But like some of the players from that era have gone on to be pretty strong. Like Gentleman Thief is a well-known player in Virtua Fighter and Street Fighter V. We used to play a lot.
Okay, right.
Thomas was on there. Carved, you might know him as now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we talked to him last week.
There was Slide, Ryu 1999. There was like some strong players in there. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So moving to GGPO, how did that compare emulation-wise?
Oh, it's night and day. There's no comparison between like rollback and input lag. Like,
yep.
It's just zero comparison. Like, and the level of play was like much higher. Because I thought I was pretty decent at the time because I came from Kylera, which was like this own little box. And the first time I fought, like Alioun's a well-known player from France, right?
Yeah. Yep.
First time I fought him, I think I lost like 0 to 30 to him or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like a wake-up call for me of like, oh, you're not actually any good. You fucking suck. You need to work on it. So.
Yeah. What characters were you playing back then? What was your style of play?
Probably like back then, my neutral was actually really bad back then. I was pretty much like I was very infinite reliant back then. So like if I couldn't land infinite on you, I would just lose probably.
Okay.
And when I fought,
you knew about the and stuff. Like you were pretty. You had knowledge about the game at least.
I had technical knowledge, but not like fundamental knowledge.
Yep.
So when I fought Liu, and he was playing Aism, and like, he was playing like Aism, Sakura, and some other people at the time, and I remember I just couldn't land hits on him. Like it didn't matter that I had infinites, didn't matter that I had whatever. I just couldn't land a hit. So
yeah.
And at one point he had me. I still distinctly remember this because I remember at one point he had me so mind fucked. He literally probably walked full screen and just grabbed me because I was afraid to do anything. So
yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah. So that was a huge wake up call for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I often hear that Europe was a powerhouse back then. How did that happen?
I think mainly because like the US basically stopped playing the game, I think around 2003 or 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time they kind of switched to CBS2, but for whatever reason the UK and France kept playing Alpha 3. So they kept having it at their big tournaments and they kept inviting the Japanese over and they kept like actively engaging with the game. So they kept getting stronger, whereas the US kind of moved away to other stuff.
Oh, actually inviting them over to Europe to play them.
Yeah, I think there's a tournament in 2004 called Absolution or something like that in the UK, and they had some strong players in there. I think they had Daigo over, and they had
wow, okay.
Kyo Guy player was there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, before I go watch it, how do they compare the Europe players to the Japanese?
I mean, I haven't fought a ton of like the strong like well-known Japanese players. I've only fought like the Japanese who frequented like any online environments.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The ones that were pretty strong. Like there were a few Japanese back in the GGPO days who were like exceptionally strong. Crusher was also on there occasionally, but he usually wouldn't play foreigners. So, But I think the top European players were very strong. Ryu was very strong. Alioun was very strong. Sai OTG. Juice was a V Bison player, probably the only V Bison player you'll ever see.
V Bison, wow, interesting.
Yeah. Like he was doing like V Bison stuff like years and years before like anyone else, like I ever saw anyone else do it like in the mainstream. So
yeah, you still don't see it very often.
Yeah, even now. There was other strong like offline players I didn't really get the chance to play. Like I know IMX was strong in the UK. I never really got to play him.
Mhm.
There was One Up and some other like generally I thought this top European players were pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see you have some videos on your channel of you playing Makoto, that one of the more modern Japanese
Yeah, that
players.
was fairly recent, like maybe like a couple months ago. So
Yeah. How did that go? How's the experience of playing against those guys?
that's pretty cool. Like I didn't know how long like he was gonna like because I think I saw his YouTube channel, so I subscribed to him, and then he subbed back. So I sent him a quick message like, "Oh hey, like, do you want to play sometime or whatever?"
Yeah.
And he ended up saying yeah. So we just set up some games on 30th, and we ended up playing for like a couple hours.
Yeah, nice.
And I think we played 2 sets. I haven't played him too much since because he's still playing on 30th, and I kind of moved over to Fightcade. I tried to get him under the new Fightcade, but I don't know if like there was a language barrier, so helping him set it up was kind of
Yeah, okay. It's hard enough explaining in English sometimes to some people.
yeah, especially like the stuff with the whitelisting and stuff like that. I don't know if he really understood what I was talking about. So
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the characters you made is Sodom. What about him appeals to you?
I mean the fact that he's really strong helps, but
Yeah.
I just always liked him. Like even before I knew he was good, I just thought he was interesting because it's like he wasn't the standard sort of like fireball DP type of kid. Like
Yep.
and his normals are really weird. Like he has these really funky normals. I like this design. Like just kind of like a lot of different things about him. There's like kind of the similar things that drew me to Cody like initially because he was just kind of an offbeat character, and I kind of like that. So
Yeah. He's a very Alpha 3 specific kind of character.
yeah, you don't see a lot of other characters like him. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anyone in like modern, like in Street Fighter 4 or 5 that plays similar to a Sodom? Like, I'm trying to think. He's got an interesting like hybrid grappler kind of style.
yeah, not that
Maybe
I
like
can
an
really
Able or
think
something.
of. Maybe like Birdie in Street Fighter 5 has some qualities of him, maybe, but like
Yeah. Okay.
he's very much because he's very like a lot of his kit is very defensive oriented. Like the way the slide works, the way it scrapes and all that stuff. But then he's got like command grab, and he's got some other stuff like interesting stuff to sort of help open you up. Especially because I don't think he would have been as strong in any game other than Alpha 3 because of guard crush. He doesn't need strong mix up. He can just kind of keep swinging at you until you have to do something basically. So
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
And according to some of the tier lists I've seen, it seems that V Sodom is particularly strong. The other one is like you drop significantly down.
yeah, if he was on ASM, it would be significantly weaker, just because he has a lot of other holes. Like, if you get on top of him, he doesn't deal with pressure well, and he's very big and fat, and like if like Chun gets on top of him, it's not good, for example. So
And the reason that the V Sodom is high in tiers is that just because of the infinite setup. So like, you can set up from, is it mid screen or something? You can
set up
transition all the
like
way.
even if he didn't have an infinite, if he just had the regular Vs, he would still be exceptionally strong because he can activate off of more situations than almost anyone because of just like the pure range and speed of it. If you lift anything from anywhere, you jump from anywhere, he can technically activate. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And you also play Cody, who's very like Vism heavy, I would say as well. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast to Carved because he doesn't like the invincibility frames on the Vism. He thought like it was a bad aspect of the game. Do you agree or disagree with it? No.
I mean, it definitely has its ups and downs. I'd say if you're talking about the pure fundamentals of the game, Vism ultimately is probably bad for the game because it introduces a lot of situations where if you make a mistake, you just kind of die for it.
Yep.
So it kind of hurts the whole like consistency part of the game where like, you win by being consistent and neutral because if you take away Vism, like I like Vism, but I do think there's certain aspects of the game that are much better off without it because Alpha 3 is not an Oki heavy game. Like if you get knocked down on Alpha 3, it's fine. You have a million options. You can usually tech, which means you're not stuck in a hard knockdown situation, or you can roll or you can do something, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a game like let's say like I'm trying to think of like what an Oki had, like Street Fighter 5 in some situations, or Street Fighter 4 when they had the unblockable setup and stuff. If you got knocked down, like you just had to guess, right? You just had to pray that you guess right. So in Alpha 3, that's very rare. So it's a very neutral heavy game. So I think Daigo even talked about this recently, where he said like if you lose in Alpha 3, you kind of just nod your head and go like, yeah, that's why I lost, right? Like
I saw that video. It's
you're not thinking like, oh, that was bullshit. Like and like Vism does introduce a lot of bullshit, so
I think Vism hugely introduces bullshit. Like you press one, like it really changes the risk reward profile. Like you make one mistake and it's 50% rather than just like get uppercutted or whatever.
Yeah, and because the risk is low, the way the activates work is like if you guess wrong, it's not really the end of the world unless they also have an activate, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But activate, as someone who has Aism, unless they time like a perfect reversal super, like you kind of just do a block string, push them away, and then you wasted your meter, but nothing happened to you, right? So
yeah. Then if you're a Kuma, you just run away and build meter up again and wait for the next.
As much as I love Aism, I think ultimately the game probably would have been better off without it. So
yeah, it's interesting.
So are there any mechanics, like other mechanics that you don't like about the game, in particular, or you think could be done better? I
mean, I'm sure there are. I'm sure I can think of any initially. I can tell you that of the systems in the game that I really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, are you a fan of Guard Crush?
I'm a huge fan of Guard Crush, and I'm a huge fan of the way of the tech system because the tech system weak Oki, which makes it more neutral heavy, and then Guard Crush forces active play. Like I know there's benefits also to having like basically a stronger down back because it forces people to do shimmies and all this other stuff. Like if you play third strike, you have to work pretty hard to open up someone who's smart. And there's aspects of skill to that, and it's a different mind game, and I can appreciate that. But I just like the fact that Alpha 3 is a game where if you do nothing, you die for it, basically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
The play is always active. Things are always moving. It's always moving pretty quickly. Like it's good. I think it's good for the game. I think it's good for spectators. I think it's good for just forcing people to do something. It keeps it interesting, right? So if you pin on someone, you always get some kind of reward. You get some guard. Even if you don't get damage, you get guard or something. Whereas if I play Street Fighter, and I know Street Fighter 5 is like famously a very like offensive game, but if you work hard to get in on someone like Guile, you can still get nothing technically, because if he just defends properly, you can literally come out of it with nothing, which is kind of good, right? So.
Yeah. What about mashing?
You mean the damage reduction?
Yes.
I mean, I'm kind of whatever on that system. I don't really mind it, or I don't like it or dislike it. Really, it's there. You can use it. I'm not a big fan of it in the sense that like. I don't know, it's a weird thing to reward, I guess, to me, because like if you're getting hit, then you have to like just mash. I mean, technically, I think it's a timing system, but everybody just mashes because nobody can figure out like the exact timing. So.
Oh really? Is it meant to be?
I think it's like
I thought it was a mash. Okay.
Something like that, but like it's easier if you just piano match everything, it's more consistent. So.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. Do directions also count as mashing?
I'm not sure for that. I'm not an expert on that particular system, so.
Yeah,
okay, fair enough.
I think it's a huge difference for like if the super itself has one big hit somewhere. If you mash and reduce that hit, like Rose's super, for example, you can reduce super by like almost half because of the last hit does most of the damage. So.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Rose Xism in particular is
you can just completely nullify a ton of the damage on that super. So.
Yeah, when we had Sandman on, he said that he didn't like air blocking, and when we had Carved on, he said that he liked air blocking. What's your take on it?
Fan of it generally, as long as you have systems in place to let people deal with it universally. So Alpha 3 is grab, right? So if you combine it with the air throw, it means you can go for it in more situations with lower risk. So that, and you can only they set it up so you can only air block stuff that's airborne or very specific specials. So. Standard tier still work, right? You can't just keep jumping at someone and block stuff. So I'm generally a fan of it because it introduces more Yomi into the whole anti-air and air terror game.
Like jumping in, baiting a certain punish, and then just blocking it. And
also, it gives you ways to anti-air. Like if you're in a situation where your character like doesn't have a good reactive anti-air, if you chicken block, like if you air guard it at a certain angle, you can get like a good situation off of it, or sometimes even a punish. So.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's similar to games like I guess like Vampire or Marvel, where chicken blocking is also a thing. A lot of anime games also use it. So.
Yeah, well, that's what they say. Alpha 3 is kind of like a proto anime game in a way.
Yeah, it has a lot of unique systems that kind of never came back to Street Fighter for whatever reason. So. I always thought it was very forward thinking in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember James Chen on this podcast said that it invented the anime genre. That was his hot take on it.
Yeah, I would say Darkstalkers did. If you go back really far, I would say Darkstalkers is kind of the prototype of the anime genre. But Alpha 3 definitely had a lot of influence. Like the Alpha series in general had a lot of influence from Darkstalkers. Like Alpha 1 had chain combos. They experimented with that. And, like people didn't like it, but they tried it. Right? It was something that they looked at. So.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, when we had Sandman on the podcast, he named you as his Canadian rival. When did you start playing him first?
I'm not sure. Probably somewhere on GGPO.
Yep.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the stronger Canadian players. Like, if I was thinking of people from Canada who are strong, I would say him, Junior Mafia. Like, he plays Gen. He's another strong Canadian player. I think Temujin is from Canada as well, the Sakura player. So.
Yeah. Okay.
So, what advantages do you have over him, and what advantages do you think he has over you in terms of play style or stuff like that?
I mean, I think I just like I'll probably just play the system better at the end of the day, and maybe my fundamentals are a bit stronger. So,
Yep.
Like we haven't played like a ton, but I played him enough that like I think I have a pretty good idea of like where he's at, and he has a pretty good idea of where I'm at. Like he's definitely one of the people that I would say is strong and that is like always improving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. If with that kind of strong Canadian scene, like I saw there was a tournament set up for North America, and it was two Canadians met in the final quite recently online. Like, just say Alpha 3 got added to the next Olympics. Do you reckon Canada would, have a chance of getting a podium finish?
I mean, depending on like who, like what would the competition be? Like people like top Japanese and stuff like that, or
Yeah, I mean, just say it was team tournament. Take your best 3 players. Obviously, Japan's probably coming first.
I mean, like I think Canada's strong players, but if you compare them globally, I'm not sure how well they compare. So
yeah, okay.
I would say I would put like Japan and Europe above.
Well,
like
Europe,
I would say Japan, Europe, US, then Canada, maybe. So.
But when you say Europe, do you mean Europe now, or do you mean prime Europe?
I mean, that's a tough question because like someone like Sai, for example, he's a V Karen main. He's not in his prime per se, but if you get him to play, he's still really strong.
Yeah. Okay. So if the Olympics are on, all these people started to practice. But probably
I think if you give them like a couple days or like a week just to like kind of refresh themselves, they would do pretty well. Like Aliyun would be strong no matter what. VRU would be strong no matter what, as long as you give them a little bit of time to refresh.
Yeah, so they're like sleeping players. Once they're awoken and
if you just wake them up, they'll still be strong, right? Like so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because I think my main rivals, quote unquote, in the game, I think we're always more on the European side than anything else. Like Sam is probably one of the Canadians that played the most, but like if I look at like quote unquote rivals, like consistently, most of them have been European.
Okay.
How's the connection? How's the connection from?
I'm East Coast, so it's not that bad.
Okay.
So if I'm playing like to the UK, it's only like 100 something, like 100 MS, 110 MS or something, which is
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's not terrible.
Yep. What are some common mistakes you see intermediate players make?
I would say one thing. Okay, if you're fighting Vism, I see a lot of people just hitting like a ton of buttons against people up close with it. I'm like, if you maintain a consistent rhythm of doing that, it's very risky because all you have to do is just YOLO activate and you lose, right?
Yeah.
I see that a lot. People don't like, they're not used to fighting Vism in general because it's not not a lot of people honestly use it because either they don't want to learn it or they don't want to deal with it, or because it's an old game, right? Like not a lot of people want to dump a lot of time into learning a lot of technical stuff, or they just hate the idea of it, right? Like a lot of people just hate Vism, period. So they're not used to fighting it. So if I'm fighting people, I notice that immediately. Like people just keep hitting buttons in my face, and in my head, I'm just like, if I just YOLO activate now, you die, right? Like it's So like it's something you kind of have to train into people. Like I'll do it until people back off a little bit because that's a huge mistake I see people make because they're just, and that's not so much because they're not adapting. It's just they're not used to dealing with people who have that option.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I would say another one is just like not utilizing the systems. Like a lot of people don't use air guard very well, or they don't use like
recovery and stuff.
Yeah, recovery is properly. Like because there's ways you can mitigate a lot of situations by just recovering, right? Like if you neutral tech and back teching, or if you do it later or earlier. And just, I guess, also maintaining an active neutral, because blocking an Alpha 3 is a much worse option than in other games, just because you're always losing guard off of it. And if you're playing someone like V Cody, you block like 4 hits, your guard is gone, right? So
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think overall about playing against strong Vism players using X or Aism? Like, how do you approach that? Just saying not pressing a lot of buttons up close to them.
The thing, if you're gonna play Axis, I'm gonna say first of all, good fucking luck, because you don't have alpha counter or air block, so it's gonna be really
high degree of difficulty.
Yeah, like your room for error there is not high. Aism, you can make it work. It's just gonna be tough because I think it also depends which character you're fighting. Like if it's a Vism character that has to activate up close, then it's not as bad. Because you have to basically make a big mistake up close for them to get anything. If it's someone like Sodom, you can run into problems where like you neutral jump from like half screen away and he activates, right? So
Yeah.
because you don't have a counter activate to deal with that. But I would say the main thing if you're gonna play Ism against Vism, take advantage of the damage increase because you've got 20% more damage on every hit, which it does add up. Like it's very noticeable if you hit them like 3 or 4 times. So
you kind of have to be aggressive, but also not overextend yourself and get Visms all the time.
Be confident in your neutral game and just take like the extra damage on the hits. And if a big thing I would say for Ism is unless you're playing someone like Guy, who's very reliant on level 3 super, if you super on a combo, use a level 2 or 1, just in case. Because if they don't die off of it, you want 1 meter for alpha counter, just in case they try some shit. So like if you blow your meter in level 3 super against say like V Ryu, and then he throws you into the corner afterwards, you're just screwed, right? Like you have nothing there. So
yeah, the high-low, like
or just guard crush, like you just straight up like same with Sodom, he'll just activate, push you in the corner, guard crush you infinite, it's done, right? Like so.
Yeah. Okay.
You the alpha counter, like just in case.
Yeah, that's good advice.
How has the meta changed since you started?
Probably just more Vism heavy, I would say. Because like over time you've seen more and more of the like there's characters who don't like super optimal Vism stuff, like Ken for example, and seeing certain characters like that move more towards Vism over time just because it's just good insurance against other people's bullshit basically.
Yeah,
and I've seen like I think the main thing I've seen recently is people have developed these like kind of corner unblockables in Vism, like the VC2 activate, which is the medium kick, medium punch, medium kick activate. So they set up like a certain sequence where no matter how you block, you're basically going to get hit and then you're going to get launched, and they can potentially set up like crouch cancels or something up. I know Ken has one, Chun has one.
I've seen doesn't Akuma have one like with air fireball or something?
This is a little different because he's just got the straight up demon flip unblockable.
Yeah. Okay. How do those other ones work? Can you go a bit more? I'm not really familiar with those ones, like the Ken one.
It's I don't know the exact sequence, but it's basically it's medium punch, it's the medium activate, and then there's like a sequence to, and then I think it basically ends with the DP, and no matter how you block, you're gonna get hit with the like with low or a high into the DP, and then he can set up like crouch cancel fierces off of it. It's really good for someone like him because his mid screen is kind of janky, and he's got a corner guard crush setup, but it's very difficult to do, and it does have a high low built into it, but it's much harder to set up because like V Ryu has the hop kicks, right? He can just fireball hop kick, whatever. Ken, when he gets pushed back, he has to do this weird Kara fireball thing with standing roundhouse.
Yeah, okay.
Or like just constant Kara fireballs, which is very difficult.
It's not something that you're gonna get like the first time you try it.
Like go short into it, mix the overhead into it, so it's like a very technical thing to do.
Yep.
When did you start noticing crouch canceling becoming like a common sort of thing?
I mean, the Japanese were doing it a lot, probably as early as like 2002 or 3. They were probably doing it a lot. I know when they came to Evo, like Evo had an infinite ban rule in place.
Oh, really? I never knew that.
At the time, so this was early on because at the time, infinites like there were fewer setups for it. People didn't know as much, right? So they would just ban the infinites themselves. But then as they got more prevalent, as people found more and more ways to set them up, it just became like the ban became impossible to enforce, basically, so the game just kind of quietly disappeared from Evo.
Yeah. So
I think that was a factor in it just not being there anymore. So
the original ban before Australia.
Yeah. Ultimately, like my stance on I'm not a big fan of the ban because it's too hard to enforce. I'd rather they just ban Vism entirely because that just takes all the weird freak out of it.
I remember joking with you that we could get someone with an umpire shirt. And they could count each time they crouch cancel, and they would find the player. So like,
I know you talked to James about it, and he was in favor. But my argument against it would be it's just too hard to enforce because there's just too many situations. Like, there's too many variables. Like, if I set up a situation where it can potentially lead to an infinite, but I don't infinite, is that a ban? You know what I mean? Or if I do 1 rep, is that a ban? If I do 2 reps and drop you, is a ban?
I think it would have to be at the level of banning crouch canceling. I would have thought. Like if
that's hard because there's situations where like it doesn't lead to anything like that. Like for example,
I'm saying it's a more black and white thing that you can actually like.
It would just be too hard because like let's say Blanca does up fierce into low fierce, like that's a crouch cancel, right? So it's like, is that a bannable thing? Do you know what I mean? Like that type of stuff. Plus, you can do it by accident without even trying, right? So
yeah,
I'd say the safest, easiest thing to do if you want to keep that stuff away from your scene, just ban Vism and have a really solid Xism Aism scene.
Yeah.
So technically, be like, you know, if you've listened to that Daigo interview, it'll be the game he always wanted it to be, right? So
yeah, that's interesting how he thinks that, even though he was, you know, he was definitely using Vsm like in those early videos as well.
Level thing, right? Like it's if the strongest thing in the game is that system. Like Daigo is a player who will always play the system. So he will play in the way that's strongest in whatever the game is. Like people think he's a defensive player, but he's actually said a lot of times he's an offensive player. It's just the way the games have moved. It's more bait oriented now. It's more, you know, like it's different. Like you can't just keep swinging like you did in the older games, or you can't just keep like in ST, for example. There's not a big mix up in ST because it's just the grabs are so strong in that game. So
yeah, his Rio is very attacking in ST at times. Daigo as well.
Yeah, Daigo's a very active player. Like people mistake that for being defensive when he's zoning and stuff like that, but he's always doing things. He's not gonna sit very often. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, my take on the video, the Daigo video, it was not that he thought Vsm was a bad mechanic, but it was just it widens the gap between beginners and more experienced players, and it makes it harder for them to compete.
I mean, yeah, there is that aspect of it as well. Like definitely on a technical level, it introduces a huge wall for a lot of new players. And I understand it can be very intimidating, which is why I tell people to just get comfortable with the game first, like get comfortable with your character and the systems. Don't worry about them. Like, even if people tell you, oh, you know, you're gonna get stomped by it, whatever, it won't matter until you're at like a much higher level generally.
Yeah,
because
the top like good players will beat you with ASM all day anyway. So it's like
just you might get bullshit out in a few more situations, but if you're making better decisions consistently at the end of the day, you should win. It's like, there was a Japanese player on GGPO. I think his name was like Asemi Rika. I think she's like a model or something like that, but he just used her name and he played A Ryu pretty much exclusively.
Yeah.
And he would just stop everyone. Like I saw him just very rarely did I ever see him lose, and he would just like I think when he played Vi at the time, he beat Vi like 10-1 or something. Like it was just
wow. Okay, so serious.
Yeah, like just stopping it. Like he would play people's like top Vsm characters, didn't matter. I'm pretty sure he was actually a V Ryu or V Akuma main. But online, he was just playing A Ryu for whatever reason. So
that's crazy. He would just pick, just like when you're playing someone weak, when I'll just play A Ryu. He was doing that for everyone.
I beat my V Akuma, I'll just beat you with A Ryu. So
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, A Ryu is meant to be pretty strong, right? Like you see him up the top of lists of A and X only.
He's not missing anything in his kit. That's the thing, right? Like he's got great supers, he's got good normals. His fireballs, it's not super good zoning tool, but it's a good poke tool. Its DP's still strong.
Yeah. Okay.
Hurricane does a ton of stun. If you land like low short into Hurricane, it's probably stun. So
I think Hack as well was mainly a Aism player. Is that correct?
He is. Like he does play V Charlie and Via Dawn, but he hasn't put a ton of time into optimizing them. I keep nagging it. Like Tank also nagged him to work on his because if you're talking about pure Aism players, like of the active players in North America right now, I think he might have the strongest neutral. Like I think he has a good claim. Because if I just sit and play footsies with everyone I played, he's got probably the best footsies.
Yep. Would you say Tank is up there with that?
Yeah, Tank for sure is really strong. Especially like, also his V Relento, sorry, especially. Like Tank's characters are strong, but his V Relento, I would say, is much stronger than his other ones.
Okay, cool.
Just like with Hack, it's like Hack is a Charlie Adon main, and he'll tell you he's an Adon main, but honestly, I think his Charlie is stronger. So.
We know Japan has the strongest scene. Is there particular aspects that they do well that non-Japanese players are lacking in?
Vsm stuff. 100%. Like they understand the system. They use the system to its fullest potential. People here kind of try their best to act like it's not in the game almost. So that's the biggest gap. Like when I fought Makoto, that was the biggest difference. He played the game. Like I think that's the one thing I do differently, which is probably the main reason I like quote unquote stick out, because I've always used the system the best of like the current active players. And when I fought Makoto, it felt like playing someone who like finally I'm playing someone who like also uses the system that way, right? So
yeah, like what kind of things specifically?
Yeah, like do you mean with Vsm? I'm sorry to cut you off, but do you mean optimizing or do you mean setting up more so?
Both.
Okay.
Especially the setups, because there's just so many situations where he knows that he can activate. And I know that he can activate, so we had all these weird mind games going on where, like, I wouldn't press a button, he wouldn't press a button, we'd just be sitting there, and when one of us would just up, like, because we both understand, like, if one of us presses a button at a predictable time here, we just lose. So we just both of us just opt to do nothing, which is like you get some interesting mind games out of that sometimes. It's like the parry mind game in Third Strike, but like nobody wants to press the button, nobody wants to get parried. So,
but it also kind of makes the game degenerate into like defensive, just don't blink kind of play in a way.
I don't know if it goes like that hard into that extreme. It's more just it can introduce some weird like looking sort of Yomi elements for like you're kind of wondering like if you're watching as a spectator, you don't know. You're like, why aren't they doing anything sort of?
Yeah. Okay.
But the nature of Alpha 3 is such that like you kind of keep having to do stuff anyway. There's just some weird situations where like someone jumps, the other person does an anti-air, and then they both just kind of jump away, stuff like that. Like.
Yeah. Okay.
So it becomes a game of like baiting out the other Vieism. Right.
Yeah, just doing stuff that is like safe against like YOLO activates, like earlier anti-airs or air to airs or going to air grabs, or like if they jump, you neutral jump and land on top of them. Like you go to alternate options basically so that if they try to just YOLO activate through it, like on a read, you're not gonna die.
Yeah. Okay. So the mind game there is someone's jumping in, and the first level is you're just going to anti-air them. Then the second level is they would activate through your anti-air. Right. And then third level is if you wouldn't anti-air and activate their activation.
Right. So like it introduces layers to the anti-air game, so it becomes very Third Strike-ish in that way, where you have to change up the way you anti-air basically. So like some people hate that obviously, because for the same reason that some people hate Third Strike, because they just don't want to like if you jump they want a DP, right? They don't want to have to think of like I have to change up the way I'm doing it every time. So
yeah.
Yep. You've had a chance now to play Fightcade 2. How does it compare to Fightcade 1 and other emulators?
I'd say it's a lot better. I wouldn't say it's as good as it was when I first tried it.
Really?
Before they put in Run Ahead, because before Run Ahead, it was insanely smooth. Like I was testing with the Third Strike community, and
could you just explain what Run Ahead is?
I'm not probably the best person to explain this, but basically it's a way of lowering input delay, but it's more taxing on your CPU. So, if you have like a lower end PC, it's probably not the best idea to use it.
Yep.
But the situation now is such that like pretty much everyone has it on because they heard it's better, which is sometimes leading to like less optimal games than they should be because someone technically just shouldn't have it on. And I think there's also some weird issues sometimes. Like if one person has it on, the other person doesn't, it can introduce some weird skipping and stuff. So.
Is that a setting that you choose in Fightcade 2? I'm not.
It's the emulator itself. They kind of hit it in the emulator because they didn't want too many people messing with it initially. Yeah, okay. But everyone kind of found out about it, so everyone's turning it on. Like there's two options: there's Run Ahead 1 and Run Ahead 2. Generally they've not recommended that people use 2 because it's something where like it's very taxing and you have to be pretty close usually for it to work well.
Yeah. Okay.
But before they put in the Run Ahead, the first like maybe day or two I tried it, I was literally playing people like Third Strike is not a game that's emulated as well as Alpha 3, so it doesn't run as well on Fightcade generally. But it was working like up to like 150 ms and it was still super smooth. And like I was super impressed. I was testing with like Nika KO and some other players, and we were both like, "This is the best online experience I've ever had with a fighting game." And then it's still really nice. Like even with the Run Ahead, it's still really nice. I'm just not a fan of the loss of consistency on the connections end.
Yeah, sure.
It's technically got less delay now. If you're in an optimal situation where you're playing people with a good computer and a good connection, it's technically better now. But on average, I find it's less consistent. But compared to Fightcade 1 and the other platforms, it's still light years ahead, I would say. Because there's less input lag, there's less rollback. Setting up games is super easy. It saves your replays for you. If you care, I don't really care about a rank system, but a lot of people do, and there is a rank system in there for you. It's active, chat, like there's all sorts of good stuff, right? So
So what is your take on the rank system for yourself?
I don't really care because like the thing is like for me like I pretty much know everyone already, so like I don't have really a reason to grind the rank system because for me like the purpose of a rank system is to show people how it's to get you into games with people who are similar skill level, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So like if you're like a bronze player in say like Street Fighter 5, you join the game of a grandmaster player, they're probably not gonna play you or they're not gonna play you very long, right? Whereas if you come in you're like say Ultra Diamond or something like that, they kind of know what you're doing, so you're more likely to be able to play, and the matchmaking will set you up with similar people. But for me, because it's a lobby, and because I know most people, I haven't found a reason to grind it. So
it's less of a problem.
Besides the people that are manipulating the system to get a higher rank, would you say it's effective in what it's doing?
I mean, Shine, like one of the developers, he's been like fiddling with it a lot. Like early on, it had the issue of once you hit, I think it was B rank or something like that, it was like almost impossible to gain points. Because the way they had it set up early on was even if you won against someone who was much lower ranked, you would still lose points, which is really weird.
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense.
I think they changed it recently, so like I think it's a much better system now. I'm probably not the best person to ask about it because I almost don't play ranked. Like I've had people ask me like, why don't you play ranked? And I'm just like, it's just for me because I already know most people. So
yeah, sure.
I think if you're a newer player trying to learn the game, it's very useful because it lets you gauge other people's skill level, lets them gauge your skill level. It gives you something to shoot for, right? So I think for new players, it's great.
I kind of like that about Fightcade though, the mystery of like playing somebody new and you have no idea how good they are and you kind of size each other up in the first game.
I kind of like that because before it was like you knew who was good by word of mouth, right? Like you didn't need a rank. It's just if you frequented the room, you knew who the good players were.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like an arcade kind of.
And there's no foot. Like people would just play you regardless because they didn't know. So like it wasn't like if you were D rank and you challenged an A rank, it's just automatically going to cancel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. You've said to me that you don't go to many FGC events, but you went to the last Canada Cup. What was that experience like?
It was fun. Like I didn't enter anything, but I went because like I play a lot of Third Strike as well, right? So I had friends from the Third Strike community in the US who were coming. So I mainly just went to see them and hang out. So I just kind of hung out, played some casuals. It was probably the first like event or like local or anything like that I've been to in like over a decade. So
yeah, wow.
It was just nice. It was nice to see people face to face. It was nice to play. Like it's a different dynamic when you're just kind of hanging out and everyone's talking and eating or whatever, right? Like
yeah.
It's always friendlier. Like I always find that like people who, if they're kind of like not assholes online, but like they can't be more unpleasant. Let's say like people generally behave offline and they're generally more chill. Everyone's having a good time. No one's getting mad about losses because there's no lag or anything like that. Like.
Yeah, sure. There's no excuses.
It's nice to have something like that. Like that's something that is very difficult to do in North America where the landmass is so big because it's not like Japan where like everyone's a 40-minute train ride away from everyone else, right? So
it's even worse here. We're more spread out.
Yeah, like because you guys are also very isolated, right? So like
so we're like 11 hours drive away from each other probably. Where those are two cities both on like the East Coast. But yeah.
I'd say that the biggest benefit you guys have, in my opinion, is because you're close to Japan. I guess in theory you could connect with a lot of Japanese players.
It's kind of on the edge. It's like high 100s, like ping normally. So it's possible we can play with Japan.
Yeah, I do see Putin playing the Australians a fair bit as well.
Yeah, because like the one thing I've always said is like you're only as strong as your competition, right?
Yeah.
And I know that people like I see a lot of people giving advice of like, oh, like even people I know and like who are my friends, they'll say shit like this where they'll be like, oh, it's better just to play training mode instead of playing, suboptimal people. And I'm like, you can say that because you've already developed the base, right? You can say that because you live in a strong offline scene. Not everybody has that. So if you're telling these people just to play, training, like they're not going to go anywhere, right? They're going to hit a wall and just stagnate. Because you need the experience. Like I would say it's better to play stronger players in a suboptimal environment than it is to play in a perfect environment against weaker players.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's my opinion always. So.
Yep.
Well, how do you find the difference between good online like Fightcade 2 or whatever versus offline? Is there still a big gap there?
Depends. Like I would say, here's the thing I'll say about that because there's a lot of like people always talk about this. I've never seen someone who lost like a long set to someone online and have it be different offline.
Yeah, that's a big point actually. Yeah.
Better decisions, you should win the set. I will say if you're playing like a 1-2, it can definitely make a difference. So if it's a tournament situation, I would say it's a huge difference. If it's just playing sets, I don't think it really matters. Like that's why like if people are getting upset over, I'm just like, if you drop a game here and there, it's whatever, right? Like it's casual.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the sets you played in more recent times was against Justin Wong. How did you go?
I think I lost like it was like 3 or 4 to 5 or something like that. It was a pretty short set. Like I didn't play very well because it was just like I wasn't sure how long he was gonna play, and I was just kind of. I'm gonna be honest. I really underestimated him because I figured, he hasn't touched the game in forever or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I just kind of went into it sort of half-assed, and he surprised me by how prepared he was for a lot of shit. So that was my own fault for just not taking it as seriously as they should have. Plus, it was casuals. Like, I mean, he wasn't taking it that seriously, but
Yeah. Who was he
I
playing?
probably
He plays
like
Saka, right? Oh.
he plays VSEC. I think I made the mistake of forgetting that he entered the 30th tournament. I think in California a while back, but the one that Makoto.
Yeah, he plays a fair bit of Alpha 3. He knows what he's doing. Still.
Prepare a little bit for that probably. So, because I did play John Choi a little bit recently because he started playing online.
Oh wow!
And the difference there was like very clear in that John clearly hadn't played for a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, got a different feeling with Justin, whereas like he had kind of had a small refresher like fairly recently. So,
yeah, what was it like John Choi? I've never heard of him playing online. Like, could you feel that he was a strong player? You know, maybe underneath a bit of rust or whatever.
The thing about Choi is he was like a god back in the day. Like him and Vi, you can't really compare them now to anyone because back then they were just so far ahead of everybody else. Like, especially because West Coast was generally always stronger than the East Coast in Street Fighter. Maybe not in Marvel, but in Street Fighter for sure.
Yeah.
So like, I always gonna have a lot of respect for him because, like, he pioneered a lot of shit that I'm using, right? He pioneered a lot of shit that everybody is using. So,
like what kind?
And I think, just like stuff in neutral, just like watching the way he would zone, watching the way he would do things.
Yeah.
And like, you know, because people like sometimes people will say like, oh, this player's washed up or this player's washed up, and I'm like, yeah, but like they're not grinding the way they used to, and they were so far ahead of their time that like I feel like you should still, give them respect. And like he's someone who could get super strong at whatever he's playing if he cares to.
Yeah. Well, we did have some trolls in the Zero Division saying he's washed up. I remember.
Like if he cared, like if he actually gave a shit, like he could make everybody eat their words. I'm pretty sure. But I think at this stage he's mostly playing for fun. So, and he's just kind of getting refreshed with the game, and it was just for me. I like after playing Wong, I was a little bit more worried playing him, because I was thinking like, oh, maybe he's, kind of ready for that stuff too. And honestly, if I'm being honest, like I'm not good at short sets. Like if you put like this is purely like my own weakness, where it's like if you tell me if we play, let's say like 2 hours, I can play how I play. If you tell me it's a first to 3, I'm gonna like tighten up in a way that's not really good.
Yep.
Like basically switch mistakes and do it, I'd play different, and it's not always a good different. So against Makoto, like there's people, like a lot of people came up to me were like, how are you gonna beat Makoto in 2 sets and then you lose to Wong and whatever the first of? I'm like, because it was a different environment. Like me and Makoto were just running stuff.
Yep. So my next question was going to be why you don't like competing in tournaments. So is that why? Just
I'm not big on playing under pressure, and that's like I know some people say that's weak or whatever. It's like fine, because for me it's always been about like I just want to play to challenge myself to see how far I can go and how better I can get. So the tournament is more like proving that to other people. So that's like saying like consistently, I'm the best, and I'm gonna come here to prove that I'm the best. I really don't want that kind of pressure because for me that takes a lot of the fun out of it for me because then I have to perform. I feel like if I make a mistake now, it's really bad. So
yeah, I can understand that.
I will say like, there's not that many stakes. If you lose, it's not a big deal. But like that's just like my own neurosis where I'm like, I don't want to like put myself out there like that because then if I was gonna do that, I would have to take it a lot more seriously, which I really. Not that I don't take it seriously, but I would have to play in a totally different way.
Yeah, okay.
Because I like being able to play loose. I like running long sets with people. I like just playing the game, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't want to play with that mentality, I guess.
Like there's people who are boosted. Like I know Sanford, for example. Like Sanford, he thrives in that kind of environment, right? Yep. It fits him, right? So like it doesn't do that for me. It just makes me nervous, and it just makes me like I don't know, like.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Do you think best 2 out of 3 is that a fair representation of people's skill levels? Like, just say all tournament matches were, set of 20 games. Do you think that would change the outcomes much?
It's a representation of your tournament, I guess your tournament prowess, sort of, because it's different. Playing casuals is not the same as tournament because a long set is about adaptation. It's about who can keep adapting better than the other person.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas tournament is about how quickly can you adapt to new people and new strategies or whatever, right? New matchups.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's a totally different skill set. So I think if you're training tournament, it's good training for tournament. If you're training casuals, it's good training for casuals. Like I remember for Tekken, for example, like Knee even had separate tier lists for casuals versus tournament.
Really?
So, if like a first to 10 is totally different than like a first to 2 or somebody. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
Fair
One
enough.
thing I wanted to ask you about, I think. Yeah. So I've played a bit of Blanca in most Street Fighter games, but I've kind of switched away from him in Alpha 3, just getting frustrated with him as a character. Like, what? First of all, why do you play Vism, and just what do you think of him overall in the game?
I mean, I play on Visa mainly because it's a good way for me to protect myself against the other shit with him. Because to me, he's a very jump heavy character in certain matchups. Because he's got a very good jump. It's fast. It's got a good arc. His jump-ins have a lot of priority. And if he can't jump in certain matchups, it makes it very difficult to get things started. So me having Vs just means I jump at someone, and if they just reaction activate, I can just activate through it and just nullify it, right?
Yeah, okay.
So that's big for me. And then the fact that I get like the CC juggles and stuff is just like a bonus off an air tear. Because the way his super works is it only works defensively.
Yeah, you can't set it up. You can't combo into it. You can't.
There's probably specific setups near the corner and stuff where you can
that's
kind of, but like ultimately it's if they jump or if they're on top of you, like during wake up or something. So I'm not a big fan of relying on that. Matches where you just literally won't get to use it. I can do like little silly like sequences or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And I think overall Blanca, if you're looking at just his neutral, it's very strong. He's got good normals. In the matchups, they can't punish Blanca Ball. That's a very good move.
That's that's a huge. I reckon the matches that he does well in is when he can just Blanca Ball for free, whereas against Dalsim or something, that someone who can punish it, it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, like Guy can punish it. I think Dalsim can. Sodom can.
Rolento can super.
Yeah, Rolento, Vega, some other people. But if they can't, then it makes neutral very oppressive because they can't play footsies if he's just rolling at them, right? So that's very strong. His normals are strong. Crouch Fierce would be a really strong button if you couldn't duck it for most characters. CVS, you can't duck it, so it's really strong. It's high priority, it's fast, it's long range. In this game, it's a little different because it's mostly duckable, but I think he's very strong in the neutral set. If you want a character with strong neutral, I think he's a pretty good way to go on that. His anti-air can take some getting used to because you have to up Fierce for consistent anti-air. Like the ground ones tend to lose to higher priority jump-ins.
Yeah.
And when I was playing Wong, I made that mistake. Like I don't know why I was doing it, but I was trying to like stand Fierce anti-air and I kept just eating jump Fierce. So
yeah, or you got to up pull or something.
Yeah, you should have up Fierce, and then you get the free crouch cancel off of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. But what do you think about him as like? I feel like the part that I got frustrated with and how he doesn't feel like Blanca in other games is that he doesn't have many like mix-ups or kind of tricks.
That's true. That you can do. True. He definitely doesn't.
Like no cross-up. I feel like no cross-up is insane for Blanca.
Yeah, he technically does have one. Jump
it's when they crouch. It's only when they're crouching, right?
Some people you can hit standing. Depends how big their hurt box is.
Oh, really? Okay, I never knew that.
I hit it on Shotos, but I think the spacing is like it's so specific that you basically can't purposely do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true. Like his mix-up is not very strong in this game. He doesn't have the tech mix-up of ST. He doesn't have the hot mix-ups. He doesn't really have a lot of the stuff he normally would. But I think what fixes a lot of that is he can guard crush pressure you really well.
Yeah, I get. Yeah.
Electricity, if you can get any kind of reset into medium or fierce electricity, he can just chip away like your entire guard bar almost in one sequence. If you stand fierce, is a very oppressive button because it's basically a poke and an anti-air at the same time. If they try to jump, it's just going to straight hit them.
Okay, one button option select.
Yeah, basically. So if you just keep harassing with that, like sooner or later they're going to get card crushed because it's a fierce button, right? So in the matchups where they have a hard time dealing with that can be very oppressive. So you don't need the mix-up if you just guard crush pressure. I think it's the same and Sodom in that respect, where they have weak mix-up, but because guard crush is a thing, they don't.
That's interesting. Yeah. So it's a different mindset to playing other games, I guess.
Mindset change that might help you in that area at least.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Which character do you think personifies the kind of trickster that Blanca is in other games within Alpha 3?
Within Alpha 3.
Maybe like a Relento or something.
Leto definitely can be. He definitely can be very like hit and run, bait stuff out. Yeah, him like Claw can be a little bit, but he's more like a straight runaway character.
Yeah, I hate Claw. Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of really like heavy mix-up characters in Alpha 3 for the most part.
A bit
like
of Sakura, I guess, with the stupid
Yeah, she has like she's one of the few characters that has an Oki loop. Yeah, because her Oki loop is actually like. But I would say the one thing about that is she does have to commit a little bit. Because some people don't know this. If she knocks you down and goes for the cross-up, if she wants to stop the roll, she can't time the cross-up perfectly.
Yeah,
if
yeah. You have to choose.
So you can sort of choose there. It's just problem is it's a guess on both your parts. So.
Yep. What is your opinion of Alpha 2?
I mean, I think it's a fine game. It's not my favorite game, but I don't have anything against it. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the way VIA VCs work in that, I'll be honest, but
yeah.
They do exist in Alpha 3. Some people don't know that. Like, it still exists, but because it doesn't have like the I don't know what you would call it, like when it pushes your character forward, the range is much shorter. So you pretty much have to be point blank, and it pretty much has to be a short for it to work in Alpha 3.
I never knew. So if they're standing up blocking and you're very close, like like Ryu or something, you activate and short, that's unblockable?
Yes. You can reversal during the window. Like you can DP, you can super, or you can activate.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any of those options, you can't duck in time because there's no time to like the freeze will basically make it so you can't.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's something people don't know. Like I've caught people with that. Like if you watch some of my coding matches, like I'll activate low short, and if they don't block it, that's probably why.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep. What can we expect to see next on your channel?
Probably probably more like Alpha 3, Third Strike, some ST and Vampire here and there maybe.
Okay, cool.
Probably something else playing again more. Like it's something I liked playing a lot, and I haven't uploaded a ton of it, but it is another game that I played a lot before. So.
Yep. So it's going to be just more gameplay footage. No plans on doing like a tutorial or something like that.
Maybe at some point, like I would have to, like I have been trying to learn how to edit better and stuff like that. So because right now I'm basically just dumping like long sets on it. Like there hasn't been any concerted effort on my part to try and make it more consumable. Because I know it's not consumable. You upload a 3-hour set, no one's gonna sit through a 3-hour set, right? It's more just an archive for me to like look at my matches, and if anyone is interested, they can basically take a look at it.
Yeah, sure.
Plus, for me, it feels better if I upload a set because like I don't like it when people put people on blast by saying like we play 50 games, you put up one set where someone loses, right?
You put up the one round where you perfected them out of
I was a little salty when I played Gutex because he did that shit to me, which is why I actually started.
He's famous for that. He's famous for that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit salty because we played like a lot of games and he put up like the one round where I lost really bad, and I was like, okay, all right, but
that's.
So I try not to do that to other people. Like I try to put in timestamps on all my things. I try to put the whole set if I can. I try to put highlights of stuff that they did was good, so it's not just like a highlight reel for me. Like if it's really one-sided, like super one-sided, and especially if like they're just learning whatever, I just straight up won't upload it. So
interesting.
If Alpha 4 were to come out, what additions would you like to see?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm not sure about additions. I'd like to see a lot of characters for sure.
Like Marvel 2 level number of characters, or?
I mean, for me, as long as it's like, I just want each character to be unique, right? Like, I don't need 3 variants of Wolverine, you know what I mean? But as long as the character's unique, as long as, I mean, balance is a tricky issue because no fighting game is ever truly going to be balanced. But I would just like to see an Alpha 3 without some of the things that made it, that kind of ruined the good parts of it. Like, as much as I like Vism and use it, there's a lot of aspects of Vism that are bad for the game.
Yeah, sure.
Like, infinites are just straight up bad for the game. Even though, like, if it was a tournament, I would use them. Like, I'm not a fan of it, just on a principle.
Yeah. Could you see, have you heard of the ROM hack of ST New Legacy, which kind of tries to address some balance things? Could you imagine a ROM hack of Alpha 3?
I'm sure it's done. I'm sure it would be interesting because, like, I think crouch canceling as a mechanic itself is interesting until it leads to infinites, and then it's bad. Yeah. So if there was like a system where like maybe you could keep them from flipping for a certain time period, if it's a counter hit or something like that, would keep some of the juggles without turning into like an infinite fest.
The other thing with infinites, doesn't it require that property of after you leave Vism, your attacks still kind of send them up into the air as if you're in Vism. Like maybe fixing that would remove the influence.
Until you hit neutral, it's still a counter hit. So you still get off of it. The problem is you never hit neutral if you crouch cancel, right? So I don't know how you would fix that without, because the way they fixed it before with uppers, they just removed crouch canceling entirely, which, I mean, that's one way to deal with it for sure. Because I think Quest mentioned that you guys might mess around with upper or experiment with it or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, we have. Some people really like it because they grew up playing it on home, like console releases. But it
would definitely be.
Yeah, I think most people still. There's other broken stuff in it as well. Like there's all these like guard crush loops, and it hasn't really taken off as like replacing vanilla.
Yeah, I know in the PS1 version, like apparently DJ was just flat out broken. I know that much because his fireball almost had no recovery. Which if you have a Sonic Boom style fireball and it has almost no recovery, that's not going to lead to good things. But like I've seen Vism combos where the recovery is so short, he can actually walk in between the fireballs and still keep linking stuff. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, I haven't played it too much to comment, but maybe when it comes, I think it's coming to Fight K2 pretty shortly when they get Naomi support fully sorted out. So
that might be tougher just because I think that's still input lag based, so it might be
exactly.
They can, I don't know, fiddle with that, but I guess the trouble with the ROM hacks and stuff like that is it splits the player base, right? So if you have a small player, it's hard to convince people to try, like, here, put time into this game that no one's playing, right? Like, it's tough to sell that, so...
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and it's tough to sell it to people who are very experienced in the game, and they don't like the things they've been practicing for years change.
Yeah, like, there's some people who'll be excited by that, and there's other people who'll be like, oh, what is this shit, right? Like, this doesn't work, or this doesn't work, or this is different. Because I remember, like, certain games have tried to issue updates to address balance issues, but they changed so much that people didn't like it. Like, the Third Strike update, for example, that nerfed Chun, it also removed the Aegis unblockables and the Oro unblockables, and people hated that, so nobody played it.
The
Vampire Savior 2 had an update that changed a bunch of stuff that people didn't like, so, like, people literally just abandoned that game and went back to Savior. Like, that can definitely happen, where if you put out a different version that people don't like the changes, they just won't play it.
Yep.
Yeah, like HD Remix as well, similar example.
Yeah, that's funny how that worked out. There was a lot of excitement for it when it came out, and then it just kind of died and went back to SD, so...
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions, Luke?
No, that's about it from me. You can finish it up.
Okay. Lance, this segment is called the Hot Seat. I haven't done this one before. I need you to give brief answers to these questions.
Sure.
We need some music. We need some music in the
we have the high
background.
music in the background.
Yeah, the final round. The final round music.
Yeah. We'll have to get the Alpha 3 announcer to do a thing for us.
Yeah.
I forgot you guys had one.
All right. Yeah. So, will Europe ever make a comeback to the Alpha 3 scene?
Never say never, I would say that.
Who is the most underrated character in Alpha 3?
Oh. I would say, honestly, maybe Claw, even though he's top tier. Like, a lot of people keep saying, why is he top tier? And they just haven't seen a good one.
Yep.
Should Quentin MacLeod be reinstated as a moderator in Zero Division?
Hell no.
What would Red GGPO need to do to compete with Fightcade?
Oh, that's a tough one. Fightcade 2 has a lot of, like, just features that Red GGPO is missing right now. And I'm not an expert in Red GGPO, so maybe I'm not the best to ask about this. So I'll just say... look at what they're doing and see if you can do it better, I guess.
Should Evo be cancelled?
I mean that was a weird situation because I knew some of the people in that situation. So
really? Wow.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer to that would be. Like, I think if it gets canceled, something else will pop up in its place.
Yeah.
Because all the organizers they're still there, right? They didn't have any part in whatever controversy was there. So I think if it happens to go down, I think we'll see something else pop up.
Is Alpha 3 better than Third Strike?
I mean, I like both games for different reasons, right? So.
Who is your toughest opponent on Fightcade?
Ooh, on Fightcade. Recently or of all time?
Recently.
I would say recently. I would say Hack and Tank are definitely two of the strongest players that I've played recently, especially Hack. I think if Hack were to sit down with V Charlie and really learn V Charlie, like, he would be giving just everybody like a crazy run for his money. Because if you play as A's and Charlie, it is just super fucking dead solid.
Yep.
And like I don't know when it happened because I remember him back in the day when he was learning, but like at some point his neutral became extremely strong. So I think if he were to put time into V Charlie and really like, optimize it, he would be a very, very, very dangerous player. And I guess as a quick like for the strongest players I've ever placed, like Aliyun's probably the most memorable for me because he probably taught me the most. Even though he never sat down and like physically instructed me, just from constantly playing me and just from us talking and stuff, he's probably the player who had the most influence on me overall.
Is Alpha 3 Upper worth playing?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's a different game. It might not. I probably wouldn't like everything about it, but I would. It's definitely something that's interesting. I think could be explored.
Will you attend another FGC event by the end of 2021?
I don't know about it. If it's close, maybe. But with COVID, who knows? Like we've kind of gotten to a point where it's actually like someone said this to me before, but it's a really good time to play on Fightcade because of COVID. So like kind of everyone's on there right now because nothing's happening live. So you're gonna get access to really good competition if you play currently.
Is Chun-Li mid-tier or top-tier when playing online?
I think if you're playing at ASM, she's probably stronger than she would be offline just because of the pure speed aspect plus whatever like lag is there. But because of Vism, I feel like there's situations where she's still going to struggle. She doesn't do a lot of damage, doesn't have a lot of burst. So she's very much like a poke character. And unless you can do her infinite, which is really hard, it's hard to set up and it's hard to do. So, I mean, I don't think she's that bad. I think she can be obnoxious. I don't know if you've played Darjeeling on Fightcade. But he'll like purposely shake the screen as fast as possible to like mess with the frame skip when you're playing neutral and stuff like that. Like stuff like that is really obnoxious, but and he's from Japan too. He's a Japanese troll. You don't see
pro-Japanese tactics.
Yeah. What additions to emulators would you like to see? Or what addition? If you could pick one.
I mean, the one I always wanted was just good netcode, which I guess the fact that Fightcade was a thing is kind of already what I wanted, which is actively developed, like netcode that's still in active development. So you can count and get better, which is what I always wanted, and it's what we have now, which is why I think Fightcade 2 is an exciting thing for anyone who plays older games.
If you were to pick up another character, who would it be?
I mean, Shodan was my recent project because I always wanted to learn him more, and I've kind of been putting more time into him. I think V Juni actually has a lot of really cool stuff. I just don't like charge characters, but Aliyun used to play her, and I always thought she had lots of interesting stuff because she's such a weird character. She has push block, she has the air drill, she's got like a command grab and a teleport. Like
nobody knows the matchup.
Yeah, no, like very few people know the matchup, and very few people know that if you play her lame and the other character can't punish the air drills consistently, she can be super obnoxious. So I think I don't know if I would learn her per se, but I think she's a very interesting character that no one's playing.
Cool. Did you enjoy coming on today to this interview?
Yeah, it was fun to do. It was nice to talk about the game. Like, you don't really get a lot of chances to talk about Alpha 3 because it's a game that people mention occasionally, but it's not like Third Strike where it's still actively being played a lot online, or ST, for example, so... And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about the game. Like, so many people say stuff about the game that's either straight up not true or is like hugely exaggerated. So,
cool. Well, thanks for coming on. We'd like to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lives podcast. If you'd like to see some high-level Alpha 3 play as well as Third Strike and Super Turbo matches, check out QQG's channel in the link in the description below. Also, like and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode. We'll see you then.